Hello class, welcome to your last lesson, 7.7, Area of Composite Figures. So yesterday you worked on the perimeter, now we're going to be moving into area. So while you're doing this work, you can check back to the formula page that I gave to you yesterday, and that will give you your area formulas as well for all of our shapes. All right, so we're going to be looking at example number 1 first. So right off the bat, I'm going to try to make it into two different shapes. So because I know it's composite figure, I know it's different shapes. So I've got a rectangle here and I've got a triangle, but I cut it right across here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label the triangle as A1 and I'm going to label my rectangle as A2. So that's area of 1 and then area of 2. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to find out our missing information. So we see that this total line here is 11. Well, since I've just cut right here, I've turned it into a rectangle, and I know that a rectangle, that both of my sides here are going to equal the same thing. So this right here has to equal 7. So what would be left would be 11 minus 7, which will leave us with 4. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. So since I sliced it right across here, I'm going to be removing this chunk here. So I want to find out what is this base, this number in here. So my full length is 18, and I see this line here is 13, and it stops there. So we get what's left. So we would do 18 minus 13, which would give us 5. Okay, so now if we look at our formula page, we see that the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. Right? If we were to add the same shape on the side, we would get a square, which is base times height. And so we would divide it in half. So we're going to plug in those numbers. We've got two numbers here. We got 4 and 5. So 4 times 5 divided by 2. So our next step, we're going to do 4 times 5 gives us 20 divided by 2. That gives us 10 centimeters squared. Okay, that little 2 is very important after the centimeters. Okay, so that's how we show area. So centimeters are our dimensions. All right, so now we have our rectangle, and our rectangle is the same as a square, length times width. So we have 18 times 7, so that gives us 126 centimeters squared. So now I want to find the total area. So the A total equals A1 plus A2. So because we have two different shapes, we're going to use 2. So our first one was 10 centimeters squared plus 126 centimeters squared gives us a total of 136 centimeters squared. So what that 136 centimeters squared is telling us is that all of this shaded part in here, including this little triangle part, that all of this area combined is 136 centimeters squared. All right, so now we're going to look at our second example, which right off the bat we see a triangle and we see a circle, or half of a circle anyway. So whatever numbers we'll use, we'll just divide it in half. All right, so we have our triangle, so we're going to call that A1 and A2. So because we've already dealt with triangles, we know our formula. We have base times height divided by 2. So how do we find those numbers? Well, they tell us this is the height of this triangle is 7 feet. And we see it right across that side, the whole base of our triangle from end to end is 8 feet. So 8 feet times 7 feet divided by 2 gives us 8 times 7 is 56. Divide that by 2 is 28 feet squared. Again, that little 2 is very important. Please always add that little 2 when you're dealing with area. So when we're multiplying two things together, we put that little 2 down there. All right, next up we have to do A2, which is our circle. Now if we look back at our formula page for area of a circle, we see that it's pi times r squared. Okay, that is not r times 2. Pi r squared. Okay, so we're going to show that we did that way back in our first unit. Okay, so then we're going to divide it by 2 because it's half of a circle. So our radius, which is halfway, which goes to the middle point of the circle. So that's our radius. The other one for circles is diameter, which is all the way across. So our diameter is 8 feet. So we need to divide it by 2 to get our radius. So we want to find out halfway. And that's going to give us 4. So 8 divided by 2 gives us 4. So pi times 4 squared. So that's 4 times 4. I'm going to show that as well. 4. That's going to be 4 times 4. Okay, and that gives us 16. So it's not 4 times 2. So 4 times 4 is 16. Times that by pi. We're going to divide it by 2. So pi, we usually use 3.14. So 16 times 3.14 gives us 50.27. We're going to divide that by 2 again because we only have half of the circle, and that gives us 25. I can't read that for sure. It looks like 1 feet squared. Okay, so our area, now our total area of the full shape, our upside down ice cream cone, is A1 plus A2. So A1 plus A2. So A1 was 28 feet plus 25.1 feet gives us a total of 53.1 feet squared. Okay, again, with area, we always have to have that squared. That's the little 2. All right. Now, sometimes we're going to have to use subtracting, as we see in our example number 3. Our A total is going to come from the full rectangle. We're going to subtract out this semicircle. So first what we need to do is we need to split it up into A1 and A2. So as we can see, our A1, or our A to our rectangle, is length times width. So we want to find the full total length, including this cutout semicircle part. So that's 6 yards times 13 yards, and that'll tell us the whole inside, which gives us 78 yards squared. Again, that's squared. Now A2, we just remembered, or we just used it before. The area of a circle is pi times r squared, and we see that our diameter is 6. So we need to find our radius, which is halfway. So that would be 6 divided by 2, which gives us 3. So we would take pi, and we times 3 squared. Again, this is 3 times 3. Okay, not 3 times 2. It's easy to forget that sometimes. So 3 times 3 gives us 9 times pi. Again, 3.14 gives us 28.27. And we need to divide that in half, again, because we only have half of the circle removed. So we need to divide it by 2, which gives us 14.1 yards squared. So now our total is the full length, which is 78 yards squared. And we're going to subtract out that semicircle, which is 14.1 yards squared. And that leaves us with 63.9 yards squared. Okay, so that's how we can use subtraction as well. So there's our 3 different examples there. All shapes that we see, and we have one of those formulas. So remember, just split them up into smaller shapes, ones that we know that we can do, and then we don't have to play with funny numbers. So that's why we call this composite figures. So find things we know, add or subtract. Good luck.